So on to Sunday's race. If you want to hear the rest of my opinion on the weekend, go back and watch the whole podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. The link to the full podcast will be in the description. So Lewis came onto the radio with an engine issue, literally on the way to the grid about half an hour before lights out. And he said the power was dropping out on the straights. That was believed just to be a lap 2 grid issue, as Andrew Shovlin put it, and there was no further issue in the rest of the race, which was lucky for Lewis. So it was literally absolutely tipping it down an hour or so before the race. So it looked like it was going to be a wet start, maybe even a safety car start. But it stopped and started to dry up literally just before the race starts. So it was going to be on inters, but it looked like we were going to get to softs at some point, or slick tyres anyway, at some point in the race. So it was likely an intermediate start for everyone, and there was actually more rain forecasted towards the end of the race. So it was just sort of everybody's on their toes as to what was going to happen, basically. And then on a formation lap, Pierre Gasly was told, we expect more rain in 20 to 25 minutes, which is what we were expecting before that. As the lights went out, Max Verstappen got away well from pole position, as did Sergio Perez, getting up to P2 very quickly. And then as did Lando Norris getting up to P3. It was Charles Leclerc who rounded Tamburello, the first chicane, coming off the pit straight in P4. Horrible start for Ferrari, which got even worse. Daniel Ricciardo tapped Carlos Sainz and put him out of the race. Yeah, so Sainz and Ricciardo tangled. It was just a multi-car sort of tangle. There was no lasting damage really. It wasn't like a Bottas incident in Hungary, for example, but you saw a couple of cars involved in it. But yeah, so the main front at the time, which is what we knew at the time as well, obviously when the first lap goes, it's literally just like, okay, what's going on here? So much chaos. So from what we saw, it was Daniel Ricciardo who tapped the back of Carlos Sainz. Sainz span out onto the gravel just before turn 4, whilst Ricciardo had front wing damage and had to pit. So we then saw a replay which showed that Mick Schumacher got sort of tangled with Ricciardo and went down to the P17, but he didn't have any damage. Whilst Valtteri Bottas did have a bit of damage, but luckily got away in a similar position to what he started the race in. So because of all the tangling, there were a couple of big rises on the start. George Russell went up 6 places to P6, whilst Kevin Magnussen was up to P5. So Lando went up 2 places as well, one because of the Carlos Sainz incident, the other because of the overtake on Charles Leclerc. And then we saw Sebastian Vettel, obviously on the Inters, where the Aston Martin may be a little bit better, and obviously because he's used to work conditions, he got up to P9 and Lance dropped to P11. Both of them getting good starts, but really obviously both drivers suited to the conditions as well. So as you'd expect, the Sainz incident brought out the safety car, and it was out for a couple of laps as well. And then by the time lap 5 came around, Max Verstappen led the restart, got away well, and then Charles Leclerc on the restart was all over the back of Lando Norris. He couldn't get the move done then, obviously, because there's no DRS either. There was one overtake on the restart as well. It was Sebastian Vettel who got past Fernando Alonso. Vettel obviously relishing the wet conditions, and Alonso, this was the start of just a downhill trajectory for Alonso over a couple of laps. So yeah, Vettel up to P8 and Alonso down to P9. And then by the time lap 6 around, Alonso was just dropping down the field. Snowden got past, Stroll got past, and then Lewis Hamilton got past. And as Lewis Hamilton got past, his side pod just burst. Fernando Alonso's side pod just went like that. Bam. It just popped. It was like, do you remember he had a similar issue in Bahrain testing? Do you remember that? I think it might have been Ocon's car actually. I think Ocon's Alpine just burst on the first day of testing. The side pod. It was so it's not the first time it's happened. But yeah, Fernando was out of the race at that point. And we got a replay from the start of the race again. It turned out that Schumacher, when he was sort of trying to avoid Ricciardo, so Schumacher's tyre damaged the side pod, put a little dent in it. But at the time, you wouldn't have expected it to just fly off as it did. But obviously that explains why Alonso was just dropping down the field as the car became more and more and more undrivable. And then lap 7 he came in and retired. And then on lap 8, Charles Leclerc literally bounced his way past Lando Norris in the pit straight. The Ferrari is suffering more than most with the porpoising issues, but obviously the Ferrari is not as hampered by the porpoising issues as the Mercedes is in car performance. The Ferrari is one of the fastest cars, even with the constant bouncing. But you saw Leclerc literally bounce past Lando without DRS, obviously, because it was wet, and it was a great move by Charles, getting up to P3 again. And obviously the 2 Red Bulls in his sights. So a couple of laps later, George Russell was actually finding a bit of a groove in that Mercedes, and he was right in the back of Kevin Magnussen. Obviously, the Haas has been a lot faster than Mercedes all weekend, but George managed to sort of find a little added touch and make the Mercedes work on Sunday afternoon. We saw literally on lap 11, we saw Russell literally alongside Magnussen on the straight, but Magnussen fended him off. Some great defending from K-Mag. and so Russell had to back out. And then on lap 12, Russell looked to get the move done by late braking. And we saw Magnussen brake up very early as well, just to sort of let him get past. But Jordan made a mistake going round into turn 3, so the exit of the Tamburello chicane, and went onto the curb. And then Magnussen just sort of came back down the inside and was back ahead again. It was just, obviously it was a mistake from George, but it was nice to have the two cars wheel to wheel around a narrow track like Imola is as well. So as this is all going on, Valtteri Bottas is just chilling behind Russell and Magnussen, like, oh hi, here I am now. So George had to get the move done pretty damn quickly after that, and he got it done when you least expect at Variante Alta, which is the corner coming out of Acqua Minerale, going up the hill, and then the chicane up the hill, to the very start of Sector 3. George got the move done there, down the inside, when K-Mag literally would have least expected, and it set up the rest of the race for George. It was a great move from him as well. So fair play, George. Good move that. And then Bottas, literally in the exact same spot that he retired his car in Sector 3 in qualifying 3 on Friday, just down into Ravazza. Valtteri Bottas made a great move stick on Magnussen. He came out of Variante Alta. He just had so much more pace than Magnussen. The Alpha was so quick, but it was a great move from Valtteri. That was one of the best moves of the weekend in my opinion. So on lap 14, just under a third or so through the race, the track was drying up, but the cars were sticking out because of the rain that there was expected to kind of like 5-10 minutes time at this point. The tyres were heating up. We're talking about enabling DRS then. Obviously DRS was enabled a lot later than that, controversially. We're talking about enabling DRS then because it looks safe to sort of have DRS enabled in the wet like it has been in previous races. So the track was drying up, but because of the impending risk of rain, the cars were sticking out on the intermediate tyres. Meanwhile, whilst that's going on as well, Charles Leclerc is narrowing the gap between him and Perez, so their striking distance was expected to be in a couple of laps. Actually, where has that AWS striking distance graphic been? That's not been on this season, which, I mean, it's quite nice, but that rain, it didn't come. It didn't come. So Daniel Ricciardo was the bravest of the most, obviously with nothing to lose. On lap 17, he came in for the medium tyres. Still no rain, obviously, and it looked like it wasn't coming when it was projected, so everyone followed Ricciardo. So on lap 18, Sebastian Vettel came in for slicks 2, obviously the mediums, followed by Gasly and Albun, and these three particularly, they benefited quite a lot from coming in early, jumping a couple of places up, and obviously all of them on medium tyres. So Red Bull, obviously with Perez under pressure from Leclerc, they bring him in just to try and stay ahead of Leclerc, hoping that, obviously seeing how well Gasly, Albon and Vettel did. And then Lewis Hamilton came in as well, as did Bottas. But Bottas, he just slows up on the front right. It took about 10 seconds or so to do the stop. He was severely hampered. Really, when you look at the full race result, Bottas could have got a podium if that was a well-executed stop. Genuinely, it's mad to think about it, isn't it? So Valtteri was hampered a little bit by the slow stop. And as Hamilton was going out of the pit lane, Esteban Ocon, unsafe release, they collide. Ocon gets a 5-second penalty. It was quite anticlimactic because you heard Ted Kravitz, who was speaking at the time. He was like, "Oh my god, there's a crash! Hamilton and Ocon!" Or it was like, "No, Lewis Hamilton's going to crash." And then he was like, "Oh, nothing's happened, but there's been contact." Like that was such a he made it sound like there was a massive crash in the pit lane. Obviously, they don't go very fast, but yeah, I see you, Ted. But that sort of got us all on the edge of our seats at that point. That moment did. And then by lap 20, everybody was in for mediums. Verstappen, Leclerc and Norris came in. And then Leclerc, he came out right in front of Sergio Perez. So that didn't work for Red Bull. But it did kind of work because Perez with warmer tyres was able to just breeze past him by the time they came to the Villeneuve chicane, turn 5 and 6. As all right as Red Bull's call looked at the time to bring Perez in early, he's always going to have Leclerc on the back of him in a couple of laps' time when his tyres have warmed up. So it was probably about 50-50 there, but at the end of the day, it still remained the same, didn't it? So like I said earlier as well, by stopping early, Sebastian Vettel, Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo all jumped up a couple of places, as did Pierre Gasly as well, who managed to undercut Lewis Hamilton at the time. And Albon, he went up 2 more places, overtaking Lewis Hamilton and Pierre Gasly. Alex Albon found some pace at that point in the race on the new tyres. But yeah, so Alex Albon up to P12 at the time, and it was net P11 as well because of the Ocon penalty. So like I was saying, Charles was always going to come back at Perez, and on lap 23, he looked much faster. But Leclerc was just trying to be conservative, just trying to get the move done right, especially when DRS wasn't enabled at the time still. So at the time, it actually turned out that probably was the best time to go make a move, because the very next lap, Perez switched it like that. He started finding some pace, and he set a fastest lap on lap 24, and then it was a couple seconds difference between Perez and Leclerc within laps. Also on lap 24, we saw George Russell's engineer come onto the radio and say, I think it's called Ricardo, by the way, George Russell's engineer. Don't hold me on that, but I'm pretty sure he is. He went to the radio and said that they didn't get the flap adjust done on his front wing. So he had a wet setup on the front wing in the dry conditions. So that essentially meant that he was just going to have a load of understeer for the rest of the race. So Russell was hampered a little bit. Obviously, he did a pretty good job with it, but yeah, he was hampered. And then Mick Schumacher's race just went from bad to worse at that point as well. But he had a moment in sector 3, a little spin coming out of Variante Alta. I went all the way down to P18. Now, Mick is probably the most unlucky driver. Maybe him and Fernando Alonso. The fact that Alonso's got less points than Sebastian Vettel in the championship. Spoiler alert, said they get points if you not watched the race. 2 drivers who have had a very unlucky start. Actually, 3, Ricardo as well. 3 drivers who have had a ton of pace and probably could have double figures points at least now. I know Ricardo's got 11, but you could have 20 points at least. Like, 3 drivers who've had really unlucky starts to the season with reliability and a couple of mistakes and stuff in the wet. But a couple of drivers who have just had really unlucky starts to the season are Ricardo, Alonso and Mick Schumacher. They just, be honest, the 3 of them are just so unlucky. They could be in the top 10 of the championship now, all 3 of them, and none of them are. The 3 of them have all had multiple race weekends hampered. But then it's also like really tasty racing between Yuki Tsunoda and Lance Stroll about lap 25-26 or so. So Stroll made like a really audacious move down into Ravazza, similar to Bottas one, but he was way further back than Bottas was at the time when he went for the move. Yeah, Stroll just came from nowhere, just zooming in, late braking into Ravazza 1, and then sort of tried to switch back into Ravazza 2, but at that time I almost lost the rear, so Stroll was like to continue in the race, but I saw him go for that audacious move, like, fair play, mate. It was but it was a very interesting part of the race. Crofty was like, whoa, what's going on here now? Yeah, it was pretty much but yeah, so it didn't pan out and Tsunoda stayed ahead at that point. So Perez obviously a couple of seconds down the road of Leclerc at this point. He made a mistake, went over the grass of Variante Alto, said that a lot. It was a very eventful corner, and obviously a lot more happened in that corner as well at that point. It was more of a chicane, but you know what I mean. Perez made a mistake at Variante Alto, forced him to go on the grass, basically just, went the long way around, and Leclerc was right on the back of him again around lap 28 or so. By the time pit straight came, Leclerc still didn't have enough pace to overtake. It was the Red Bull looked like the fastest package of the weekend. The Ferrari just didn't have the straight line speed that they did. We saw in Jeddah the straight line speed from the Red Bull maxed the race at the very end. It's just like watching that Red Bull in straight line, especially with DRS as well. It just goes like zoom, like that. Yeah, it was just a tale of the tape. Leclerc and Perez, not enough to overtake for Charles. But obviously at this point as well, Perez and Verstappen are setting fastest laps all over the place anyway, so that was Charles' only moment at that point again. Because of this, the DRS debate got more intense. The cars were following better, obviously, because of the new regulations, and there were some overtakes without it, but it felt like a race with DRS and with the older regs, if you know what I mean. This race did, but we were hoping that when you enabled DRS, it would be a cracker of an end to the race. But it looked safe enough to do so, but we were just like, can we please have DRS? Can we please have DRS enabled for like 30 laps or so before they actually did it? So the teams are hoping to sort of get to the end of the race on the medium tyres that they came in about lap 20 or so that's 43 laps on the medium tyres. But we didn't know that was likely or not. So Daniel Ricciardo, at this point, is just gathering data from McLaren. He's at the back of the field anyway. He's not going to get points. So he came in for hards on that 31, just to get some data on the hard tyre. And obviously those are taken to the end of the race as well. This is when the race sort of just hit a bit of a lull. So we had these sort of like 5-6 cars just stuck together, and it literally lasted the end of the race. So it went from Lance Stroll in P10 to Lewis Hamilton in P16. There was only a couple of seconds between all the cars, so they were following each other. Like, it was like a massive train without the DRS. And then when the DRS was enabled, there was a huge DRS train. The DRS was enabled on lap 36, and then Hamilton at the time was in range of Pierre Gasly, but because Gasly was in range of Alex Albon in front of him, it literally resulted in just DRS train. Like I said, it carried on for the whole race pretty much. I've actually just got on my notes here. I've just got no moves. It was just dead at that point. Like, I think the new regs are great, and it was a lot better than the race would have been at Imola last year if we had similar conditions and the same drivers and everything. Right, the new regulations allowed for that, but the way Imola is with one DRS, so narrow track, it's still a bit of a boring race because there was limited overtaking opportunities. It was better than it was last year. It's still better, but again, it's not been like it has been in Jeddah or Bahrain or even Australia, which was actually no, Australia was pretty boring as well. But Australia was better for overtaking because of the 3 DRS zones, if you get me. I'm interested to see how Miami is next week. Obviously, a lot of people are hyping up this Grand Prix, but I hope they do realise it's literally in the Miami Dolphins car park. It's literally in the Miami Dolphins Stadium, Hard Rock Stadium car park. It's literally where the track is. Like a lot of it's going to be fake. Obviously, they've got a fake marina. I'm interested to see actually how Miami will look. Obviously, it might look really good on telly, but it's very much been put up just for that, and it'll be taken down again. Like, you know, it's like a Formula E track, basically, this track is. It'll be interesting to see how it looks in 2 weeks' time. So as I was saying earlier, we were just sort of in this lull where it was like Hamilton can't get past Gasly, Leclerc nowhere near Perez. You know, it's just Gasly can't get past Albon. We were just in this sort of bit of like a meh bit of the race. I was just looking at my phone at the time whilst I was writing the notes, obviously. But then on lap 41, it got a little bit more interesting when Max Verstappen lapped Lewis Hamilton. And that just shows how full circle, 4 months ago, I would not have thought that Max Verstappen would be lapping Hamilton on pure pace at Imola on lap 4, race 4 of the season. Like, I want Lewis to win his 8th championship so bad. And that's just, I don't really support anyone in F1 really. I'm not really that biased. I just want Lewis to become the greatest of all time. And I've had my sort of on-off moments as well. Like I grew up loving Lewis. When I was younger, I've had a Lewis Hamilton hoodie from when I was like 6. From like when I used to go to Haynes Motor Museum all the time, and they used to have such cool F1 merch there back in the day. But yeah, so I used to love Lewis growing up. Then I sort of fell out in love with F1, and then when I started getting back into it again, I was like, oh, Merc dominance. I started liking Rosberg because he was competing with Lewis, because Lewis was just so good, wasn't he? And then I liked Seb obviously because he used to and then when I got back into the sport around sort of 18 time, obviously Seb was the closest rival to Lewis at the time as well, so I quite like Seb. But obviously I appreciate Lewis's dominance, and it's with the 8th world title, which he should have got in Abu Dhabi. And Max did deserve the title as well. Just, I'm not like Max deserved the title as well. He drove a great championship last year. One of the, his consistency when, getting first, second, third, pretty much the majority of the races that he finished. I think it might have been literally every race that he finished, getting being up there. It was, or, the ones that he wasn't hampered or whatever. It was, it was, as much as Max deserves the title, I wish Lewis did have an 8th title right now as well. It's just, I guess everyone does feel like that about Abu Dhabi, but it just shows how boring the race was that I'm talking about this right now, doesn't it? Oh. So Charles Leclerc was actually starting to find some pace about lap 45 or so, just sort of narrowing the gap between him and Perez to about 3 seconds at the time. So it looked like it was setting up like an interesting end to the race. Maybe Leclerc could get him right at the end. Maybe Leclerc will come in for fastest lap. So it was getting to the point where it was like, oh, okay, maybe Charles can come back into this. Maybe they'll go for a different strategy. Maybe they'll try chasing down right at the end. Or maybe they'll try something different. But, whilst they're sort of debating this, Charles was just getting a little bit closer and closer to Checo by like a tenth an hour, not very fast. But whilst that's going on, Yuki Tsunoda, who literally at a slight moment a couple of laps earlier, when he came on the radio, said he thought he was losing power, he managed to get past Kevin Magnussen. Yuki's having a great race in that AlphaTauri, and the AlphaTauris are finding pace obviously at the time because Gasly is fending off Lewis Hamilton. So on lap 50, Ferrari had made a decision. Charles was going to come in on the softs and go for a fastest lap point, and then maybe tempt Checo in to get a softs as well, maybe try to undercut him. And they did it. And he came out just behind Lando Norris, so he would have to overtake Norris to get to Perez at the time if he didn't come in. But Perez did come in. He came in to fend him off the very next lap onto the soft tyres as well to try and retain fastest lap as well, because at the time it was a Red Bull 1-2. You know, like they were going to be their first 1-2 since Malaysia 2016. Then so Perez comes out in front of Leclerc, but literally only just in front of Leclerc, as we got a great shot of as Perez exiting the pits in front, and then Charles Leclerc literally just overtaking Lando side by side by the kink of the straight, and it was just like, you know, just Perez coming. It was basically the picture of the race. Basically, it was a nice shot seeing you know, it looked really just picturesque seeing a car coming out of the pits and then just another overtake happening behind it. It was really cool. And then with a massive gap between Perez and Verstappen at that point as well, Red Bull brought Max in as well to try and get the fastest lap, obviously just because, well, at that point they thought, oh yeah, we may as well just do it anyway, just get him under fresher tyres so he can finish the race, so there's no tyre dig or anything, and then get the fastest lap as well off Leclerc, which on lap 52, which is the lap that Verstappen came in, Charles Leclerc did get the fastest lap. He was also in DRS range of Sergio Perez, obviously. It was a great call from Ferrari at the time. I put a great call from Ferrari, making up just under 2 seconds by doing that, and I put tasty end to the race when it was hitting a lull on my notes as well, which was very true. So Leclerc hit the fastest lap on that lap, but the same story as before though, he could not pass Sergio Perez down the straight. The Red Bull powertrains powered Red Bull. That sounds so weird, man. The Red Bull powertrains powered Red Bull. Can't they just call it like Honda? I know it's basically Honda. Like, come on, man. But yeah, so the Red Bull powertrains, Red Bull fended off Charles Leclerc again. At this point, Leclerc's getting a bit frustrated. He feels like he needs to get past Perez. He feels like he can get past Perez, but the power unit is just the Red Bull seem like a faster package. So Leclerc getting a bit frustrated, just trying to like sort of exploit the track a little bit, and get onto the curbs, and he shouldn't have done that because he got onto the curb at the very anti-outer, trying to sort of obviously make up time, and he span. Charles Leclerc span, and yeah, he hit the wall, and that was a very bad mistake on his part, and it cost Ferrari a lot of points. So Leclerc got on the curb at Variant Delta, span out, and then ended up with his front wing against the wall, and obviously he had some damage on there, so he managed to get out the wall, but at that point, obviously, the Perez was way on the road, and Lando Norris was even ahead of him at the time. So Charles luckily managed to recover the car, as I said. He went into the pits, but he came out P9. So quite a little swing to Red Bull in the championship, points wise, I suppose, which was actually probably needed because it looked like he was just going to run away at the championship for the first 3 races anyway. So yeah, so he came out in P9, which was behind Sebastian Vettel, Yuki Tsunoda, and Kevin Magnussen, and he is P9 as Yuki Tsunoda passes Vettel for P6. Yuki was just on a roll at that point. It was that turn 2 or 3, just at the end of the straight, but Yuki was on a roll. Fair play to Yuki, man. He's becoming so much of a better driver than like we saw last year. We just from the sort of, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through the end to the end of last season, to he just, since then, has been so much of a better driver than he was at the start of the season. Obviously, he was a rookie at the start, but he's grown a lot, and that move to Faenza that we saw in Drive to Survive, that probably has helped him. I know I mentioned it quite a lot, but you saw in Drive to Survive, for example, he's basically living like a teenage boy. Like, if you, everything's everywhere. He doesn't, Liam Lawson was just absolutely ripping into him at the time. Like, it sort of probably helped him grow up and sort of sort his life out a bit. So Leclerc got up to P8 on lap 56 to 63, getting past Kevin Magnussen. It was a pretty simple move. Obviously, the Ferrari is much faster than the Haas. And then on lap 57, we saw Valtteri Bottas, who, remember, still has a little bit of front wing damage. It was hampered by the front right error on the pit stop as well. He's right on the back of George Russell, and obviously we know Bottas and Russell have got history in Imola, that battle took us to the end. This Bottas and Russell battle. I've put here another incident ? Potentially there would have been another incident. Obviously we know there wasn't, but we saw George Russell fend off Valtteri Bottas at the end, only just. But the two of them, obviously, they're both driving with hampered cars, but that Alpha is really hooked up well for Bottas, and he, like I said, he probably would have got a podium had he not had the bad pit stop. So fair play, Valtteri, fair play, mate. and I bet that felt good as well. Obviously, he couldn't overtake George, but just to be up there with him, obviously finishing ahead of Lewis, but I bet that felt good for Valtteri as well. And obviously, he made a little sneaky dig at Mercedes as well the other day when he said he'd rather have the Ferrari power unit, which, I mean, I would have rather have the Ferrari power unit at the moment as well. I mean, I'd probably rather have the Red Bull power unit, as much, as unreliable as it is the fastest one. But, maybe Mercedes could have the fourth fastest power unit, because the Renault power unit and the Alpine is pretty damn good as well. It's interesting, But maybe not. Maybe it's just... Cause, to be fair, it does do pretty well in the McLaren, I guess. I don't know. It's still, we're only 4 races in. It's still a very sort of new feeling, really, isn't it? And then Charles Leclerc did actually manage to get another place up before the end of the race. He managed to overtake Sebastian Vettel, his old teammate, obviously, at Ferrari for P7 on lap 59. Actually, I tell a lie. It was 2 places. He managed to get ahead of Tsunoda on the final lap as well. On lap 62, he managed to get past Yuki Tsunoda for P6. So he managed to get up there, kind of, but obviously P6 and P3 are different. There's multiple points lost for Charles. But that was it. Yep, lap 63, as George Russell was able to defend Valtteri Bottas for one last time. Max Verstappen rounded Ravazza 2 and went down the pit straight and took the checkered flag and won. A grand slam for Max as well, obviously. Pole position, led the lap from start to finish, fastest lap. He won everything. A grand slam from Max Verstappen after the Leclerc grand slam in Australia 2 weeks ago. It was a dominant performance from Max. We barely saw him. Fair play to him. Max Verstappen was the winner of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. So, just to go through the race results again. So, it was Verstappen. Obviously, he won the race, grand slam, everything. Great performance from Max. It was Perez and P2, and then Lando Norris making up the podium. Lando, he lucked into it from the Charles mistake, but a very good weekend from Lando, and just shows how good of a driver he is in the wet. Obviously, let's take out the Sochi moment, but actually that wasn't him really. It was just it was just bad instincts staying out on the inters for another lap. George Russell, another great performance from him. He's really getting the maximum amount of the Mercedes in P4. He fair play to him, great weekend. And Valtteri Bottas, now he is my driver of the weekend in P5. Like I say, he probably could have got a podium if he didn't have that bad stop. And obviously without the front wing damage as well. But actually, he might have got it with the front wing damage, to be fair. That is probably one of Valtteri's best drivers in a long time. Like literally probably since... What was that when... Was it Turkey 2020 that he won? 2021? And one of the wins in Turkey, that was a pretty good drive from Bottas. I think it's probably the best since then anyway. And then Charles Leclerc in P6, obviously. An alright weekend, not as fast as Max, obviously, but an alright weekend before the moment. Yuki Tsunoda, I'd give him like a 9 out of 10. Great weekend from Yuki in P7. Vettel, again, probably a 9 out of 10. A great weekend from him, getting multiple points on the Aston Martin. That car is just awful. So getting 4 points in the Aston was great from him. Kevin Magnussen P9 again. If he wouldn't have gone for the mediums in the sprint race, it could be about P5 or so. Like he probably would be up where Bottas was if they didn't go for the mediums in the sprint race, but they'll learn from that. And then running out of points, it was Lance Stroll on P10. Did you know what? Fair play to him, a decent race. He went for some moves, but obviously the wet qualifying and the sprint race results have really helped him get into the points. So I've been critical from this season, but scoring points, he shows he's a pretty good driver in some situations. So fair play to him, Lance. Albun 11th again. Alex was very close to the points. A great drive from him as well. I've seen rumours that Williams are looking at getting Piastri in for next season. Now it's got to be for Latifi surely, because if they get rid of Albon after what he's done this season, so far it just seems stupid really. Like Nicholas just looks done. He looks so done, man. Gasly in P12, sort of resurrecting a finish from what it looked like. His weekend was in tatters before the race, so fair play to Pierre getting P12. And Lewis Hamilton, Lewis, it's just like obviously he was stuck, but he's really not happy with that car, and I just hope they improve it for Lewis in the next couple of races, because it's just sad to see really. Esteban Ocon P14, obviously he got the 5-second penalty, so he would have been about P11 without that, but he had an alright weekend. Zhou in 15th, Schumacher in 17th, and Ricciardo in 18th. their weekends were sort of hampered, so you can't really judge them very much. And then Latifi in 16th, yeah, you know what I mean? It's just, yeah, just it is what it is. And obviously Alonso and Sainz for the 2 retirements on this race, unfortunately for both of them, because both of them could be having great seasons from now. They've just been very unlucky. But that's just the way it has been this season. There's been a lot of reliability concerns. There's been a lot of incidents this weekend as well. A lot of mistakes, obviously getting used to the new cars. But I very much enjoyed some parts of the Imola weekend. Some parts I didn't. But yeah, so I'd probably give the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix probably a 6 out of 10. It was all right. It was an all right race. Prix just worse in Australia. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I've enjoyed talking about it. So thank you for watching this video. And if you're listening to the podcast, thank you for listening to the whole thing as well. It has been really fun to make this. It's a couple of attempts. I'm not going to lie to you. It's obviously trying to get all the information in. This is my second attempt at recording this because there's just so much to talk about because of the sprint race as well. But I'm glad that the second take was much better than the first one, which obviously you've never seen, but you know what I mean. But yeah, so thank you for listening to the SJMoores podcast. I will be back for a second podcast this week. There will be one about the NFL draft on Friday, just after the draft night on Thursday night. So look forward to that. I'll be sort of grading each team's first round picks. And then I'll be back after that, after the draft for the Miami Grand Prix, which it should be an interesting one. I'm obviously it's a new track, so we'll see what we get with Miami. But yeah, thank you for listening to the SJMoores podcast. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.